Good evening, folks. Thank you very much for being here this evening. I'm Jim Sturgis. I'm the Executive Director of Pioneer Institute, and it is my pleasure to be with you this evening. I'd like to just start by thanking the Lowell Sun and the Lowell City, the Republican City Committee for co-sponsoring tonight's event. I thank all of you for coming out. It's a nice evening. You could be doing other things, I know that, but this is actually really important. I'd like to give a couple of opening remarks to set the stage, tell you about the ground rules, introduce the panelists as well as the candidates, and then we'll get right into the debate. We have a lot to talk about, and I know it's a short period of time. First thing I'd like to ask all of you is you can take pictures as many as you want, but please shut off your cell phones. I'd really appreciate that. So, thanks very much again to the co-sponsors, the candidates, and the panelists. Our format for this evening is as follows. There will be 2 question and answer sessions. The first one, the initial one, will be 45 minutes in length. It will focus on taxes, fiscal policy, and jobs, education, foreign affairs, environmental question, and also some miscellaneous questions, whether on social issues, space, that sort of thing. The questions will be asked by the panelists, and the second session will be 20 minutes long after a break, where the candidates will ask each other questions. Now, in the first section, what we're going to do is we'll have a panelist ask a question. Candidate will have an opportunity to answer for 90 seconds. Opponent will have 60 seconds and 20 seconds rebuttal. During the second session, we'll have, I think it was 1 minute, followed by 30 seconds rebuttal, then we'll move back and forth that way. So let me introduce the candidates. The candidates are Jon Golnik, who is a former Wall Street trader, now a small business owner who sells Boston College merchandise online. Tom Weaver is, and he's from Carlisle. Tom Weaver is from Westford. He's a former naval officer who now runs an industrial water treatment company. What I'd like to do is, at this point, introduce the panelists. And they are, in order, Mary Burns to start, owner of Boston-based Capital Advertising, who served in executive management roles in the Wells, Salucci, and Romney administrations. Next to her is Chris Kamir, who is the Sun and Sentinel and Enterprise's State House reporter and the co-author of the online blog Polls and Politics, which I think many of you will read on the Lowell Sun site. Professor Frank Talty is last. He teaches American politics and law at the University of Mass Lowell, and he also serves as Assistant Dean of the College of Fine Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. So, just a couple of brief remarks as to why this is really important. First thing is, this is a district in which Scott Brown did extremely well last time. This is actually a sleeper race. This is one that is absolutely winnable for Republican candidates. I think a second reason why this is really important is that you have a U.S. Senate race where Scott Brown is once again running. Does that have coattails? We don't know yet in this district. You also have a former Massachusetts governor who's running for president. Whether he has coattails in this district is also an open question, but it's likely. These are all reasons why it's important. One other reason I'd say it's worth underscoring this race is that our country, for the past decade or so, has been in this, what has been called a partisan atmosphere. It's really an ideological debate. And we've seen ourselves go from 2006, a full rejection of what was going on nationally, a consolidation of that in 2008 with the election of President Obama, and then in 2010, a complete reversal, as if the American people had a case of whiplash, where they're trying to decide which way the country should move forward. And the question is, which way is 2012 going to go? Is it consolidation of the 2010 elections in which there was a rejection of the president's policies? These two folks are going to be part of that debate and advancing that debate in the district. So it's an incredibly important race. So with that, let me start with some questions on taxes, fiscal policy, and job creation. And Mary, if you'd start.
First of all, welcome to my alma mater high school. It's great to have you guys here in Lowell. This is the year of the economy. We all know that. So let's just start right off the bat with, what is your job plan?
Jim, do I start?
Please.
Thank you very much to the Lowell Sun for sponsoring this debate tonight. Thank you very much to Lowell High School for giving us the venue in which to have it. We're currently in a jobs crisis in this country, and I don't think anyone is a stranger to it. We've been sitting at over 8% unemployment for 41 months and counting. This is after spending $800 billion to try to create or save 3.5 million jobs at a cost of $225,000 a job. It hasn't worked. We have unemployment that's approaching 8% here in Lowell, 14% in Lawrence, 9% in Haverhill, Methuen, almost 11% in Fitchburg and Gardner. The private sector, where sustainable jobs are created. And the private sector isn't creating jobs because they have absolutely no visibility to tax and regulatory policy. They have $2 trillion sitting on their balance sheet, but yet they're refusing to use it to hire. And this is because they have no visibility. I would propose a few things. The first thing is we need to extend the Bush tax cuts for everyone and extend them permanently. We do this because we do not have a revenue problem in this country, we have a spending problem. A majority of those who are making over $200,000 a year are small business owners with pass-through S corporations and LLCs, and they will see their taxes go up. I think that we need to cut the corporate tax rate from 35% to 25%. That would put us at an OECD average of countries like France and Germany. And finally, I think that we need to have a one-year moratorium on regulation so that we can reevaluate the regulatory framework to see how expensive they're going to be to implement. It'll give time for companies to prepare, and perhaps in the meantime we could readdress the RAIN Act, which would force all new implementation of regulations to have an up or down vote in a standalone way in Congress. So thank you.
Moderator's choice. I'd like to pose the same question to Tom and give him 90 seconds as well to articulate his answer to that question. That's okay.
And I think I know the answer, but could you repeat the question because it popped?
Oh, sorry. Very simple. What is your jobs plan?
Jobs plan. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for everybody coming out here, the panel, the moderator. I know how to create jobs. I've been a small manufacturing business owner for 25 years. Since 2011, I've put over $1 million back into the economy, into about 9 different vendors, suppliers of steel and electrical panels here in the Lowell area. And as far as Michigan, I've also given contracts to 25 different suppliers in the area. I understand what it takes to create jobs. As a nuclear engineer, I know that we need more energy. We don't have it. As a small business owner, I remember when I started my first job, my first company 25 years ago, they had a 5-year income averaging. And what that does, just so you know, is that you don't make lots of money the first year, the second, third, and sometimes you have up and downs. And what that does is it steadies it out so that the owner, the business owner, can plan. Because, see, jobs is all about certainty. It's all about understanding what the horizon is. Every time we have a tax program that comes out to all of us, if it's a tax decrease, it has a time limit. So if we get to plan for that, which doesn't help job creation. If the taxes go up, of course, we make it definite. That's got to go. We don't need to do anything with the taxes right now. Keep them as they are. I don't know why we call them the Bush tax cuts. So energy is important, tax cuts, and if you talk to the people where I do business, and it's cleaning water. So as an environmentalist, I take dirty water and make it clean. They'll tell you it's not the cost of the people, it's the regulations, and that really needs to be curtailed.
John, could I ask him just again, I'm not trying to redirect the structure here, but I think it would be great. Could you respond to Tom and give the audience a sense as to why your jobs plan is better?
Well, I didn't hear any specifics in Tom's jobs plan, so I think I laid out 3 specific things that we can do to try to give certainty to small business. I'm a small businessman. I had a retail location in Boston, in downtown Boston, for 5 years. I can tell you I saw my property taxes double over that period of time. Regulation, I'm not a laissez-faire capitalist, but we do know that regulations increase the cost of doing business. And the cost of increasing costs of doing business is not born on the backs of business by themselves. They pass it down to the working men and women of this country, of this state, and of this district. So,
Tom, how about you? If you think about what John said about his jobs plan, why is your jobs plan better?
Well, first of all, when we go down as freshman congressmen, you don't have all the answers in the world. You have to develop you have to come up with a plan. You have to get other people to recognize what your plan is. As a small business owner for 25 years, the key is certainty. That's the only way you're going to hire. So I do believe in a 5-year income tax averaging. That adds certainty to taxes. I do know that the regulations, anybody here that's ever done anything to your home, the number of permits is times 10 if you're a small business to do the same thing. We know how to do it. So that's the type. It's not specifics, but it's more of a what direction you're going to go. How does that happen?
Chris, do you have a follow-up question on jobs, fiscal policy, taxation?
This question is actually about the Affordable Health Care Act, also known as Obamacare, which neither of you agree with, but there are parts of the law that are popular among the American people. These include allowing young adults to stay on their parents' health insurance plans until the age of 26, and preventing insurers from denying coverage to people on the basis of pre-existing conditions. So my question is, how would you tweak the law, and do you support keeping these provisions in place?
Chris, is that for John or for Tom?
That's for both candidates.
I don't believe you can tweak the law. You have to take it in its entirety, so I believe it should be repealed. I think that the single biggest challenge we face in this country, look, we have the best health care in the world. Unfortunately, it's also the most expensive. And the way we make it more affordable is by driving down costs, by introducing market-driven incentives for people to lower the cost of insurance, for example, with insurance companies, and still maintain the quality of care. And I think there's a few things we can do. I think we can allow people to buy insurance across state lines. That will allow them to compete, insurance companies to have to compete for our business by lowering their premiums, by still maintaining the quality of care. I think we should have substantive tort reform, $54 billion over 10 years, but this is going to allow doctors not to have to practice defensive medicine. And this goes to your question about the tweaks. Look, I think that actually allowing children to be on their, or students and people who've just gotten out of college to be on their parents' health insurance until they're 26 is a good thing, because we're not doing a job as a country empowering the private sector to create jobs. I believe that once your kids go to college, they should go out into the world and make their own way. But when 1 in 2 kids getting out of college is unemployed, there's no way that they're going to be able to afford insurance if they're unemployed. So I do like that. Is that my time then, Judge? Your time? Okay, that's your time.
Tom, what's your response there?
Well, you can't tweak this law. The law is gargantuan. It needs to be repealed by Congress, by the Senate, and signed by the President. Number one. Once we do that, then the work begins. I've talked before about what a vision is versus specifics. Okay, and one of the things that amazes me is from the time that we started with healthcare coverage and stuff in the late 70s, we're getting further and further away from our doctor. We're getting further and further away from the people that deliver the medicine to us. That's what hurts. And part of the responsibility is Congress and the laws they've passed. There are limitations to purchasing health care across state lines. There are limitations to a lot of things that could help it better. I would like to explore auto insurance. When you think about it, I do not know why, as a young person, you can't get some sort of a catastrophic life insurance policy that starts at an early age. You've now invested in that life insurance, but it's now health care insurance for years. And so when you come out of college and you get a job, you now can convert that to more health care. Because at 20, at 25, most of us, we believe we were invincible.
Professor Kelty.
Thank you, Jim. My question is for Mr. Golnik, and I understand that Mr. Weaver will have an opportunity to respond as well. It goes to the corporate tax rate. You mentioned as part of your plan, your jobs plan, that you would reduce the corporate tax rate, or favor of reducing the corporate tax rate from 35 to 25%. If the rate is reduced, would you favor, as has been proposed by many, the elimination or reduction of certain tax subsidies to, for example, oil companies, and what other deductions or exclusions would you make from that tax plan?
Thank you very much. Look, I think it's important to broaden our tax base, and I think we can do that, and we have to do that. So we do have to close certain loopholes. There's many of them. I can't get particularly specific, but I do think that at 35%, our corporate tax rate is the highest in the world, and I think it needs to be lowered to 25%. I think there are certain subsidies that these oil companies have that need to be closed as well. So we need to broaden the tax base by lowering the corporate tax rate, but also closing loopholes.
Including the oil one that you mentioned?
Yes.
Thank you.
Tom?
Well, I have a small corporation, and on a good year, I'll pay 36%, and if the tax rates go up, I'm going to pay close to 40%. 75% or so of the people hired in this country are small business. When we talk about a corporate tax rate from 35 to 25, I imagine that we're talking about General Electric, but then they didn't pay any taxes last year. Because the bigger you are, the more lawyers you can get involved to pay the taxes. Yes, all the corporate tax rate is, it's passed right on to the consumer, straight through. So 35, 25, 20%, that's fine. It should go as low as we possibly can. But the real tax burden is on the small business, on the people trying to make ends with hiring 2 and 3 and 50 people. That's where the tax burden needs to be fixed.
If I might just briefly, I didn't hear to the elimination of deductions or closing loopholes for those that actually don't pay the tax regardless of what the rate is.
Closing loopholes needs to be done. Closing subsidies to major corporations such as ethanol, that needs to be done as well. Our country is in debt. We're in debt big time. We are spending about $1.2 trillion more than we bring in. We can't afford large corporate subsidies. They need to be ended. Let them compete. They know how to do it. That's how they got big. They can compete again.
John, do you want to follow up at all? Or are you good?
No, I think I'm fine.
Good. Mary?
Since we're on the issue of small business, as you both know, recently President Obama and Professor Warren both made recent comments about owners of small business did not build that. Can I have your opinion on their comment on that question, or that statement, and what you both think about small business people who work, it's for both panelists, on your thoughts on that statement?
Could I ask for a minute from each of you, just because it's going outside the order of our...
Should we alternate?
Sure. Tom, go ahead.
Okay, good. I like alternating. But, yes, what they said is wrong, and we all know it's wrong. The problem is a lot of people will actually believe it, so it's up to all of us to explain that when you go and you work and you spend hours and you spend not only 40 but 60 and 80 hours a week to create something. Yes, we didn't build the bridges and this and that, I understand that, but it is our corporation. And the more successful that we are as small business, the more people we can bring in, the more benefits we can provide. That's the nature. Because the more successful we are, the more profit we make, and if you have a market for those goods, that increases the work. That increases the number of people you can employ. And those are good jobs. Working in the private sector, those are good jobs.
I think we find that as President Obama is forced to run on his record, he has an awful difficult time doing so. So he's been inserting his foot in his mouth more often than not. Obviously, that's ridiculous, and all you need to do is look at the facts. A large part of this government's expansion occurred before the 16th Amendment, which implemented the federal income tax. And these bridges and roads and things like that were built privately by companies well in advance of any government revenues building these. So I certainly think it was spoken like an individual who's never spent any time in the private sector.
Just, John, I was alive when Eisenhower built interstates. A lot's been done since...
Thanks for the tip, Tom, but just I was talking about the 16th Amendment and the income tax, where we had basically most of our expansion right at that time, but thank you.
Chris?
Thanks. The defense industry plays a major role in the Massachusetts economy, directly employing about 130,000 people. But federal defense spending is facing steep cuts on Capitol Hill and from the Pentagon, putting these jobs at risk. Should Congress stop those cuts from taking place? And if so, where should the proposed $500 billion in spending cuts come from instead?
Thank you very much. Are you talking about sequestration? Is that your question?
Yes.
The fiscal cliff. I think that it's going to take leadership from the White House and in Congress in order to stop sequestration. The super committee obviously failed in trying to find cuts. I don't believe that we're actually going to face those cuts. I think that there will be a deal made, but like so much that occurs in Washington, D.C., most of it occurs at the very last minute. But it is going to take leadership. I think that if we want to find cuts in our budget, you know, the GAO did a study and an audit that found $200 billion in savings after auditing 1/3 of the budget. Well, why don't we audit the whole budget? And who's to say we can't find $600 billion in savings? And these are duplicative services that could be done away with, and that's going to save us about 15% off the top line of our budget.
Well, the sequestration, the problem with that is that they've ordered the military to basically, when you look at a 10-year plan, the military will consume 25% of the budget, but they've said you're going to contribute 50%. The one thing that the Constitution says that is the sole responsibility of the federal government is to provide for the common defense. And we have to sit down, not budget it, we have to sit down, we've got people that have been trained to do it, and they have to decide, with our input, what is in the best interest of this country. It's not a budget thing. And if it costs $50 billion to defend and protect this country, $500 billion, then that's what needs to be spent. That's the most important thing. Because without the armed forces, we're not going to survive. That's number one. There are ways to go after the budget. We've had so many studies, the Grace Report, the Simpson Bowles, we've had so many studies. Yes, there is fraud and waste. But fraud and waste isn't going to be enough to close the gap. We collect $2.5 trillion. We're spending close to $4 trillion. If we save $600 billion, okay, we're still only $900 billion per year in debt, or per 10 years, or whatever the timeline is. It's still, we can't sustain that. We've got to go deeper.
My question, direct to Mr. Weaver with the reply from Mr. Golnik, concerns foreign aid as a percentage of the budget. Would you support generally cuts to foreign aid, and if so, to which countries?
Good question. Foreign aid is something that we cannot afford. I would prefer that the foreign aid come from companies like Red Cross, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, that type of stuff. Because when you look at foreign aid that goes from a country like us to a country that doesn't like us, where the foreign aid goes is to the leader of that country. And where it then goes is to the people that support him. Very little of what we actually do gets to the actual people. Now in Africa, when President Bush did the AIDS thing, a lot of that went through Red Cross, this and that. So the medicines and stuff got directly to the people versus going through the government. We can't afford foreign aid, and we also can't afford foreign aid to countries that don't, that choose to shut us down, that are enemies. I don't know why we're sending them foreign aid. So I'm not going to list the countries, but that's the general. If you can't be with us and support us, get your foreign aid from Red Cross and other places.
John? Thank you. I think that we see today that our foreign aid is being used in concert with helping us fight our war on terror. We have certain situations where we try to provide training and armaments for countries that we feel could become failed states. I think that Pakistan is just one place where we see we have a challenge in that situation. Pakistan, we're looking for Osama bin Laden for a better part of 10 years, and it looked like for a number of those years he was living in Pakistan in the city, Abbottabad, which is the equivalent of having someone live in West Point, where the Pakistani military academy is. So I think that we use our foreign aid in a manner that is short-sighted. I think that we use it in a manner in which we use it to band-aids instead of looking at the source of the problem. The big problem we find in Pakistan, which is where I would certainly limit aid in the event of what happened with Osama bin Laden, is that you need a comprehensive peace solution in the region. The Pakistanis see the Afghanistan situation through the lens of India. They do not want to be surrounded by India with a friendly government in Afghanistan. And if we could work on a comprehensive peace solution between the Pakistanis and the Indians, we wouldn't need to worry about which side the Pakistanis and the ISI, our intelligence service, were on.
Mary.
As we all know, this past weekend, Governor Romney picked Congressman Paul Ryan to be his running mate. And my question to you is, do you support the Ryan budget?
Thank you very much. It's funny, we as Republicans, we had our arms taken off our bodies and beaten over the head in the 2010 cycle because we dared to say we supported the Ryan budget, or the Ryan plan. And it was very funny because Representative Saunders, within about 10 minutes of Congressman Ryan being selected, sent out an email saying that they were scaring seniors that saying that the Ryan plan was going to end Medicare as we know it. Look, it is a good blueprint. It is a start for a discussion that we need to have. Medicare and Social Security present huge challenges for us as a country. If we don't tackle it, it will tackle us. I do have a couple of problems with the Ryan plan, and as the budget itself presented to me, I would not vote for it. And I'll tell you why I won't. Because until we get the control of costs in healthcare under our control, it's going to be difficult for seniors when they begin to move to more private type of health insurance that is called for in the Ryan plan. With escalating healthcare costs, the government support for seniors will not keep up with that. So it makes it even more incumbent on us to make sure that we focus on healthcare and get these healthcare costs down, and we're going to do that by repealing Obamacare and focusing on market-driven reforms that will keep costs low. Don't get me wrong, I think that the plan in of itself is great because it starts the discussion. This election year is going to be very clear-cut on what we're going to talk about. But Medicare, as we know it, if we do nothing, will solve its own itself. As it will end. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, the Paul Ryan plan is good. It was good 2 years ago. It's good now. As a first step, as a talking point, it shows a direction. But when you get into it, one of the disappointments that I have with it is it doesn't do anything for government, to limit government. We don't need a smaller government. We need a limited government. One of the reasons we have these costs and stuff is because we want to solve everything. And in the Ryan budget, he keeps allowing us to solve everything. Now, what it's going to do over a 5-year period, or 10-year period, is it's going to cut the deficit about $5 trillion. That's $500 billion, or $500 billion. The zeros get clogged up. But it's not enough. We're still spending at a rate of $4 trillion. One thing on the Medicare, which was interesting, when they put Medicare in, it was forecast to be $400 million. Now, 40 years later, it's over 1,000 times greater than that. Now I look at that and I go, how in 45 years can we take a program and make it 1,000 times more expensive? I don't know what the answer is to Medicare. I definitely want to go down and find out because I don't know any program. Even the Big Dig didn't go up times 1,000. There are serious issues. His plan's a good starting point, but it's not enough of a cut to put us on a path to solvency.
Chris.
As you know, the National Park Service has a very visible presence in Lowell, providing historic tours to visitors interested in the city's industrial history. Do you support the federal government's continued role in the Lowell National Park?
Thank you very much. I'm a big believer that all decision-making process should be devolved to the lowest possible level. I don't think that bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. Know what's good for people in Massachusetts, and what's good for people in Massachusetts is different than what's good for people in Oklahoma. I think we can be more efficient. I think instead of sending $1 down to Washington, D.C. and getting 70 cents back, I think we can devolve a lot of this decision-making process over these national parks, over our education, over our transportation, back down to the state level.
The National Park Service is a wonderful thing. I've toured so many national parks I can't remember. But it needs to be run by the states. The states aren't going to let Yellowstone, they're not going to let Lowell, they're not going to let Concord, they're not going to let them go away because they do attract people. They bring in revenue. And with that, we need to downsize and defund part of the Department of Interior. And if you go further, if we look at the Department of Education, I'm a proponent of defunding and getting rid of the Department of Education because this school is... Thank you. Number one, we don't have the continued funds to do it, but we know how to educate. The people, the teachers here know how to educate. The people in Beacon Hill, they know what's required. It has to get down. This is part of the limited government. And with that, you have to call for certain groups within Washington. The bureaucrats need to go find a job someplace else because we cannot afford this.
John, do you want to reply at all to that? Are you good?
No, I think I'm good.
Good.
I will say one thing, that, we're talking a lot about cutting government. If we were to get this economy growing again, we'd see that the amount of money, the shortfall that we have, would get quite a bit smaller. But anyway, we can talk about that later.
I think my question is for...
John, again, it's not smaller, it's limited. There's stuff the government should not be doing. That's the issue.
Let's get into that.
I appreciate that, Tom. Thank you.
Let's get into that in the back of the direct questioning for now, Professor Talty.
Thank you. My question is for Mr. Weaver. I'd like to get back to entitlements, if we might briefly. You, I think, both mentioned a little bit about Medicare. I'd like to get your positions on Social Security. In particular, with the fund running toward depletion, many proposals have been made for continuing its existence, including the investment of contributors' funds into private accounts, and also the increasing the retirement age, as many countries have done, particularly in Europe. What's your position on those or other proposals to sustain Social Security?
Well, Social Security is something that, unless it's fixed, it will be bankrupt. If we actually took the funds that came in when we had 42 people paying for one person's retirement and actually put it in that lockbox wherever Al Gore put it, I don't know where it went, but if we had done that, we wouldn't have the problem today, but we would have the same problem in 10 years. When you look at the actuaries, people live longer, people retire earlier, less people are working, we have less, we have more, so it doesn't work. There are people between age 60, 70, 80, and up that rely on Social Security. Whether we like it or not, we have to borrow the money, and they have to be given what they paid into. It's not given, we have to honor that commitment. But when we look at my sons, or we look at your sons, we realize that everything we tax and take from them for the, quote, Social Security, they're never going to get it. So we do need to look at a model that will allow them to save. I'm a proponent of saving. Save as much as you want and never pay taxes on the interest. That's what I believe, because savings is an important thing that makes America great. The problem is, because of our debt and the interest on our debt, we have no savings interest. So we have to solve a couple things first. But Social Security is insolvent. We've got to come up with a plan. Chile has got a great plan where they went into private accounts. People are doing well. Some people aren't, but the majority are. Galveston, Texas has got their own plan. There are plans that work. What we have doesn't.
John.
Thank you. I think along with Social Security, along with Medicare, are two of the biggest challenges that we face as a country. And I do think while we certainly have a commitment to those who are on Social Security now and approaching retirement age, to make sure that the plan for them doesn't change. I know we're going to be vilified by our Democratic opponents that we want to end Social Security. We don't. But we need to fix it, because if we don't fix it, the problem is going to solve itself, just like Medicare. I think that we should allow new entrants into the workforce, people who are coming out of college or coming out of high school and beginning to work. I think we should give them the option or the choice. The choice is a good thing. It's what's made this country great. We should give them the option or the choice to put a portion of this into private investment accounts.
Barry?
I'm sorry? Yeah, I just asked about the retirement.
Okay.
I think that the retirement age for people who are entering the workforce is going to have to change. That is for people who are entering the workforce, not for people who are now retired or people who are approaching retirement.
Mary?
As we all know, there's a disparity in how many people are paying income taxes in this country. And the tax code has to be changed, and more people have to contribute to the national budget. Would you favor a national sales tax and then eliminate the federal income tax? This is for both.
Taxes are difficult because if we do not control spending, if we do not get rid of excess that we're not supposed to be spending on, we can set a flat tax or an extra tax at any percentage to cover that. They're doing that in Europe now as they're raising the VAT tax. You are very correct in that if we put in a new sales tax, I'd prefer that we got rid of the income tax first and then a second later implement the other, because I don't want to give Washington, D.C. the power of having two taxes for us. Because Washington, as much money as they can raise, we all know, we've seen it for years, they're going to spend it and more. So a flat tax would be better. A flat tax would get everybody involved, because everybody should have a piece of this pie. Everybody should work, should be putting in toward it. That's important. They make the legislative branch, they make the president, they make us all report to them, because they've got a piece of the pie. It's important that everybody pays income tax of some sort, flat or what we have now.
John? I think we do need a comprehensive reform of our tax code. I would be interested in listening to any propositions people might have, but again, we would have to have a constitutional amendment to get rid of the income tax, because you don't want to give bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. two streams of income. We did see what happened in Europe when that's happened, and they still are running stratospheric deficits and debt loads, especially relative to ours.
Chris?
This is an education question. Many of our local schools here in Lowell and around the country receive federal support for programs such as Title I reading programs and hot lunches. What role, if any, should the United States government play in support for educating school children?
Is that for me?
That's for you, John.
Yes.
Again, as we discussed earlier, I believe that decision-making should devolve to the lowest possible level from the federal down to the state. This is for two reasons. Educators in Massachusetts certainly know what's better for Massachusetts pupils than a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. It's also more efficient. Again, we send $1 down to Washington, D.C. and get cents back on the dollar. So I think when we talk about things about devolving decision-making and talking about lessening the influence of the federal government in the decision-making process in our states, that doesn't mean that we're going to be cutting out funding for children or cutting out funding for teachers. It means that we're going to remove the decision-making process from Washington, return it where it needs to be with the states, and make it more efficient at the same time.
Tom?
When you look at the food, you look at the education process, you look at all the things, we can say that we want to devolve the decision-making process. Having been in the military and having been in business, the only way you can successfully devolve is if you successfully remove the upper echelon. The problem with the federal government is anytime they think a state is doing the wrong thing, they step in. We have to get rid of the Department of Education. And then we can let the states take care of it. Because there is money to do these different programs. But you can't say we want it at the lowest common denominator to make the decision. We have to get rid of those that would say you're making the wrong decision. And that would be the federal government, Department of Education.
Professor Dalty?
My question is on higher education. College education in the United States, the cost continues to rise. Students have a hard time paying not only for private schools but for state universities such as the University of Massachusetts Lowell. In fact, today, only about 20% of the university budget here in Lowell comes from the state of Massachusetts. As a result, student fees are higher, students have to borrow, student loan debt is now potentially the next big bubble, and what we're concerned about is how students are going to be able to afford education. So my question deals with federal financial aid for students. With that escalated cost, would you favor or do you continue to support federal financial aid for economically qualified students? And why don't we start with Mr. Golnik?
Mr. Golnik?
We hear a lot about getting rid of the Department of Education, but a large percentage of their annual budget, approximately 35%, is with Pell Grants. Pell Grants are used for low-income families that are suffering financial distress. It's the bedrock of how these students pay for school. And I don't think that's something that we can pull away from them. I think that the single biggest investment that we can make in this country is investment in our youth, investment in our students. And I talk from a selfish perspective. I'm a Pell Grant kid. My dad lost his job my first week when I was in school, the first 2 weeks of school, and I would not have been able to continue in school without Pell Grants. So there's a selfish element to that as well. make no mistake about it. 35% of the Department of Education budget is dedicated to Pell Grants. Pell Grants underpins educating our students. A smart and intelligent, well-educated workforce is going to continue to make this country great. And so I personally, this is why one of the reasons I'm against abolishing the Department of Education.
Tom.
Well, I've got a intern, if you will, that's working for me that goes to Hillsdale College. I asked him how much his annual tuition was and room and board. $25,000 for a year to go to Hillsdale College. And I asked why, and the answer's simple. They've never taken a federal dime. Therefore, they don't have to comply with what the Department of Education and what the government says to do. Since 1980, when we established this Department of Education to help raise our students' tests and to keep the tuition low, our cost of educating higher education has gone up over 450%. It's kind of surprising that our Pell Grants have gone up over 450%. There's a correlation. We've got Boston College and BU and Harvard that are taking more and more and more of the community. They're tax-free enterprises. They don't pay taxes, and they take all the buildings and they expand, and they don't provide to the infrastructure of Boston. It's driving Mayor Menino crazy because they still have to answer fire and police. The endowment at Harvard is more than we pay in Pell Grants, and yet that is for the teachers' retirement. The endowments, the reason why those were supposed to be tax-free was to help the inner-city kids. It seems like they could do a lot more helping of the inner-city kids, and we could cut the cost of education around. So I want to look at it. I believe that we have to get the government out of providing the higher education. That can come local again. That's where the money can be. It's a lot better spent.
Barry?
Mine's back to elementary school. Do you support the federal standards for No Child Left Behind?
I do not.
Tom? Chris?
No child left behind, no.
Chris?
We've been talking about the economy a lot tonight, but right now there are tens of thousands of soldiers fighting in Afghanistan. And in July, 46 Americans and coalition troops were killed, which was the highest total since last September. And 6 more died in the first few days of this month. My question is, if you had to make a decision about sending troops to war, and you had to explain that decision to a young recruit or National Guardsman from this congressional district, what would you say to him or her? Let's start with Tom.
Do I start? So if I had to send them over, what would I say to them? Boy, I'm in favor right now of bringing everybody home. I don't want to send anybody else over. And it's very simple why I want to bring them home. We're not letting them win. And if we look at what it's going to take to win, we can't force democracy onto these countries that have never had democracy. We can try as much as we want. We can have as many bullets as we want. But it's up to them. You can't go top down and change a government. It's got to be from the bottom up. Perhaps if we spent more time exporting our freedom and working on ourselves here. These kids going over there are brave kids. But Congress has never declared war. And we've had this passage or that passage, but they've never come up and gotten behind the troops by saying, I support this effort, and I vote that, yes, we're going to commit our troops into harm's way. And yet that's one of the founding blocks of the Constitution. That's number one. Congress has to declare war. Number two, we have to get behind the kids, and when they win and accomplish a mission, they come home. I was part of a generation that had 55,000 people lost. We never were allowed to win. We could have, but it's got to be the nation. And right now it's not the nation. They should come home. We're not a nation-building country.
If you had to make, if you were asked to vote on whether to put men and women into harm's way, what thresholds would have to be met for you to make that decision?
Boy, there's a lot of thresholds. Number one, we would have to know why it's in our best national security interest, because we take an oath to defend and protect the Constitution. So you have to look at that from ourselves. It's almost being somewhat selfish. It's never said in the Constitution that we're the police force of the world.
John.
Chris, I'll answer the last question first. The last one you just asked. I think when our country is directly threatened, it will be a threshold. I supported both the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. I do think that we should have gone to Congress to get approval of that. However, that Congress has that right for appropriations with the War Powers Act. I think that the single biggest threat to our country's stability are failed states, states like Yemen, Somalia, North Korea, Iran. And I think that if we aren't careful, these states could certainly harbor those who are enemies of our country. They can also provide armaments to those who want to harm our country. I know that they said there were no weapons of mass destruction found in Iraq, but the facts are that during the Iran-Iraq War, the Iraqis used sarin gas against the Iranians, and they also used them against their Kurdish population. So they had proven that they would use weapons of mass destruction. I think that the model going forward that we're going to see adopted is something that's going along the lines of Syria. I think that we can certainly support the opposition in Syria. A lot of people think it should be a regional issue. I don't particularly think that taking money from the Saudis, who are Islamist extremists with the Wahhab sect of Islam, is necessarily a good thing. If you're getting money from a group like that, you certainly know what type of Islam and the forces that come to power, who they'll be beholden to. So I do think there's a certain role for us, not by committing troops, but to support opposition, especially in the face of calamities that are going on there and human rights abuses.
Got about 6 more minutes for this session, and Professor Talton, do you want to continue?
I have a question that follows up on Chris's question. It relates directly to Iran, and I'll direct it to Mr. Weaver first, please. Okay. Would you support U.S. military intervention in Iran if it was the only way to stop its nuclear program?
That is a very tough question, and I don't know all the details in it. But if I look at, if I can say, there is no good option. Now, we've been in a situation before as a nation where we also had people that, you could call them a rogue nation. Khrushchev said he was going to bury us and destroy us. And what we did as a nation was we stood behind our leaders and we started to negotiate. We started to come up with verifying what happened. We did sanctions and we were tough. And we stood ready to defend and to take care of our assets should Russia have done something. Iran's dangerous. Yes, they have come out and said that they would like us dead. But I think our first option is we have to be prepared to fight, and we have to be prepared to take them out. But let's get serious on sanctions. Let's get serious on negotiation and verifying. And let's do that path first. And then if we have to go over, we have to go over. But we didn't with Russia because we stood firm, and we stood firm on principle.
John.
Thank you. I don't think that the embargo on Iran has worked. I don't think embargoes really typically historically ever work. I do think that whatever happens in Iran, I think we're approaching the day when there will be military action. We have a much higher threshold than the Israelis do. And I think that the Israelis will be the first country, not necessarily with our approval, to strike Iran.
Which is what our intervention in that case.
No, I think I would support the Israelis doing that, though.
Mary?
This is a little bit on illegal immigration. We have a major problem with the border of Mexico and illegals coming into this country. Do you have any thoughts on what you would do to curb the illegal immigration problem in this country, especially since it is affecting, we believe, our voter rolls? There's a lot of illegal immigrants are somehow finding a way to get a ballot on election day.
Illegal immigration is a sore that is killing this country. I thought I was next. No, it's okay. Go on. Okay. I'm sorry. We have to enforce our laws. We have to close the borders. We have to enforce that. We know how to do it. We need to enforce it. It hurts when we have a president who issues an executive order that says, no, I'm going to change the nationalization and I'm going to allow some illegals through no fault of their own are here. That undermines the rule of law. For years and years, we all know people. Lowell's a great town. It's got the Greeks and the different groups that have come here with the food and stuff. I love it. But they've all come They've brought their culture and they've become Americans. They've lived with our laws. We need to promote that again. And we only promote that by ensuring that we follow the rule of law. E-Verify is a good thing. If you hire somebody illegally, you should be fined for it. We have all these jobs that people say they're not good jobs for Americans. Well, that's because we're paying slave wages to illegals. And we allow that to happen. This is a nation, again, that's on the rule of law. We have to stop doing that. We have to stop providing benefits. And we definitely, as the founder of Show ID to Vote, we have to get into the registration of the voting process, and we have to purge them. One lady in Worcester went through, we went to our training, and in the county of Worcester, some 40,000 people are going to have to show an ID at the next election, because that's how much fraud or how much miscellaneous voters there were on the list in the town, in the city of Worcester. We have to do that to preserve this union.
John.
Thank you. People come to this country because of magnets, and the biggest magnet of all will be amnesty. I would never support amnesty for the illegals that are currently here. Ever, ever, ever. And I'm practical. Now, in 1986, Ronald Reagan supported the amnesty of 3.5 million illegals here, the Simpson-Zolli bill. And that put them on the path to citizenship. Now, some 20 years later, 25 years later, we have 13 to 14 million here. It hasn't worked. He said it was the biggest mistake of both his administrations. So amnesty is a magnet, some other magnets. Employment opportunities. We need to enforce. We hear a lot about reform. Whenever I hear reform, I always smile, because that means we're not currently enforcing our laws on the books. So we need to enforce and verify. As for the border, again, people talk about building a wall or building a fence. I think people will still come in anyway. If we really want to improve the border, I think we can certainly increase the size of Border Patrol agents. However, at the end of the day, illegals come to this country for magnets, and the magnets are some of the things I mentioned. We need to make sure those magnets don't exist.
I'm going to close off this session with just one very brief question, if I could. And hearing you're both small and or limited government Republicans, and the election in this district will be in great part determined by places like Lowell, places like Lawrence, and Fitchburg, and Haverhill. As small government Republicans, what do you say to someone who lives in those cities who has big dreams for what that city could be? John, if you want to go first.
Thank you very much. I think the single biggest thing that this country needs to do right now is to grow its economy. A growing economy creates sustainable jobs that pay a living wage. And I think some of the things that we've talked about tonight are what's so important. We need to make sure we give visibility, certainty to small businesses and private sector businesses so they'll be willing to make hiring decisions. Right now, they're not making hiring decisions. And again, I'm a practical guy. $2 trillion in the balance sheets of these private businesses, and yet they're not hiring. And they're not hiring because they don't know what the final cost of hiring is going to be. They don't know their future taxes that they're going to be paying. They don't know future regulations that are going to be implemented against them. This healthcare reform bill, the Affordable Care Act, is anything but affordable, and it's going to stifle job creation, and that's why that needs to be repealed. So I would tell people that smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation. Let's get this economy growing again, and let's, for the first time in 41 months, let's bring this unemployment rate down below 8%.
Tom.
We have a vision difference. I believe in limited government. John believes in smaller government. You know, there might be $2 trillion on the sideline that people aren't spending. It's not because they're uncertain or whatever. They don't know if they're going to increase their profits on it, which is why people get into business. That's why a lot of you got into business, is to make more money. And if you have an outlet for your product, then you hire people to help you make more money. That's part of what it is. When I talk to people in Lowell and in Fitchburg and stuff, I talk about opportunity and about the fact that if we have more opportunity, more freedom, then you can achieve your dreams. We have to get government to downsize, because every dollar that comes up, it's almost like the Mitt Romney and Scott Brown campaign. There's vacuum cleaners out there. Well, right now we need to let go the money supply to the small businesses so they can hire. They can't do that as long as the federal government keeps eating up all the money. So yes, it's a twofold thing. You have to cut the spending. We have to set an example in Congress. I say that Congress should cut their own pay 20%. I believe that. I believe Congress should actually buy believe that. And I also believe that the pension system of elected officials is wrong. We go to Washington to serve, not to become kings. That's why you're supposed to go to Washington, D.C. Those three things happen and you cut spending. Small business, the free market, it's going to come alive. And that's what I tell the people in the cities and in the towns.
I'd like to thank our panelists. That concludes the first section of tonight's debate. The rest of the evening will be spent 20 minutes of having the candidates ask each other questions. It's going to be run in the following manner, as stated before. One candidate will ask another candidate a question, a 60-second response, followed by a 30-second rebuttal. At the end, there'll be a 2-minute closing statement on the part of both candidates. So I'm going to start with Tom, if you want to ask the first question.
Can I take a drink?
Absolutely. Never deny your water.
So, I was born and raised in Fort Worth. I became an Eagle Scout, got involved with that early. I went to the Naval Academy. I was commissioned an officer. I volunteered to go. You have to apply. I became a naval officer and I was accepted into the nuclear power program. I finished first in my class in nuclear power, so I was able to pick my assignment, and it was to commission a brand new cruiser. I was the electrical officer, had 120 people work for me. It was quite fun being 23 years old with about 30 people older than my dad. I was navigator on a cruiser. I went to General Electric and ran flight tests, got a master's degree at MIT. I then got involved in the community, sports, religious, scouts again, even when people weren't there. Lately, Show ID to Vote, where you train people to get involved, you train people to go out and work the polls, even outside the district.
Tom, we should get to a question.
Okay, I'll get to the question. Anyway, this is me. This is who I am. John, who are you?
Well, I'm a husband and a father of 2 small kids who are 10 and 13 years old. I've been lucky because I have a great partner in my life who's allowed me to do a lot of things, run for Congress 2 times as a matter of fact. And I always tell people the thing that, I've done a lot of things, but the thing that I love most is being a husband and a father. And I moved to Carlisle when my son was young and my daughter was born there. I have been very, very active in their lives. My dad wasn't around a whole lot when I was there, and I make sure that I'm an integral part of their lives. I'm involved in their school. I'm coached just about all their sports teams. These are some of the things that I do with my family, with my community. So I'm every bit as involved as you are, Tom.
Okay.
Tom, do you want to respond?
No, it's just that there's more. The family is very important, and I have a family too. And I was just wondering about what type of background, what do you bring to the job?
What do I bring to the job? Well, I actually bring almost 10 years of private sector experience in working in the financial arena, which by your own admission last week, a couple weeks ago in Fitchburg, you said you didn't know anything about. So I think the 2 biggest challenges that face this country today are actually finance and economics. And I'm fortunate enough to come from both the private sector, working for a big company in finance and economics, but also working as a small businessman. So I think I bring both of these things to bear. And believe me, all anyone has to do is to open the newspaper every morning and see that the biggest challenges facing us are economic, and the biggest things that have gotten us into trouble are financial. I'm very well versed in both of those, having spent almost 10 years working in that arena. So I think I bring the skill set that will be able to go to work right away in Washington, D.C. and start helping people here in this district and getting people back to work.
John, your question, please.
I'd like to go back. We really are in a jobs crisis here in this district. And you see it everywhere. People ask me, they say, what's the difference between this time and last time? Well, last time people are tired, this time they're tired of being tired. And you've heard a lot of specifics here tonight, but Tom, I'd really like to hear your specific plans here to get the economy growing and getting job creation going on here in the 3rd District.
Do you want job creation by the government, or do you want job creation?
I want private sector job creation.
Okay. Private sector job creation needs the government to get off their back. They need to get the government to stop regulating, the government to stop passing rules. That's what's needed. Most importantly, they need the government to stop spending money. I'm involved. I make my money by cleaning water. That's how I do it. The EPA has set up certain standards so that if you have an industry, a manufacturing industry, and they're producing something and putting something on it, I get it out where you can drink the water. I'm in favor of cutting the EPA by 90% because the EPA has gone so far past their mandate that they're going to bankrupt Fitchburg. They're going to bankrupt Gardner by fixing their water supplies. They cannot afford it. That overburden of government is what's keeping businesses from hiring people because there is no certainty. You want a specific plan? I can't give a specific plan being a freshman in Congress. We have to build a consensus, and the vision is we have to go back to a limited government. That's the issue. The spending from Washington, D.C., the rules, the regulations. That's what's killing private business.
John, do you have a rebuttal? Up to 30 seconds.
Do you have any opinion on the tax policy?
Yes, I think corporate taxes are too high. They should come down. That's a no-brainer.
So what level would you like to see them come down to?
Well, you say 25. Why not 20? Why not 15? See, you can throw out a number, but what does it mean? The bigger corporate impact is not on these General Electric and Siemens. They've got lawyers to hide all their profits. They don't pay that money. But the small businesses do, because it goes into their personal income tax. I would much rather go and try to fix that than the other, because they don't pay it anyway.
Tom, your question?
Well, we get back to one of the big sacred duties that we have is voting, and I take it very serious because I founded Show ID to Vote. John, you just talked about supporting Iraq, and you talked about supporting Afghanistan. And I'm sorry, between 2000 and 2009, as everybody knows, you didn't vote. You didn't vote after September 11th. You didn't vote in the Bush-Kerry or Obama-McCain, or even Nikki and Oganowski. You said you were disillusioned, you were disenfranchised. And for 8.5 years, you didn't even bother to register to vote. I find that you made a conscious decision not to register to vote, and I find that troubling. Why did you decide not to exercise that constitutional duty? And with your track record, how can people trust that you're going to continue and you're going to carry out your constitutional duties if you go to D.C.? Because your track record doesn't show it.
Well, thank you for the question, Tom. Look, my voting absence is something that I've talked about an awful lot in 2010, and I continue to talk about it to this day. It's not something that I'm proud of. Certainly tough to tell my kids about this as I go through this process. And I wish it was something I could change, and I can't. What I should have done was what I'm doing now, what I did back in 2010, and jumped into it and got involved, which is what I'm doing. And I don't think there's anyone out there who watched my campaign in 2010, and now again, who says that I'm not fully committed to try to make sure I leave this country a better place for my kids and my grandkids. I'm not it's challenging as I go out and I talk to people, and I was very upfront with this issue when I first started. It was on my website. I raised it with people. I talked to people about it. But I've stayed involved. And, I came from a town of less than 5,000 people, and I ran against 3 opponents in the last primary, coming from 20,000, 40,000, and 65-person towns, and I won that primary. And I did it because I outworked everybody. Now, I've lost 30 pounds. I'm already at my fighting weight from October. It's great because my knees don't hurt anymore. And I'm working just as hard, if not harder now. So I don't think there's anybody out. And I performed very well in that general election. That general election, it wasn't a win. I'm a binary guy. But we got 96,000 plus votes.
Tom, do you have any follow-up?
No, it's just that you didn't quite answer my question. I just don't know how. I know you got back involved, but I don't know how September 11th or how sending troops to Afghanistan, how that didn't get you involved. I will never understand that.
Well, I'm sorry that you don't understand that. I think I just explained it to you.
John, your question, please.
I want to talk a little bit about health care. We've heard an awful lot about this tonight. Tom, what do you specifically see as our problems with healthcare in this country? And I would like specifics now, specifics on what you would do to try to fix the problem that you identify.
Specifics. Again, we have, you like to do in sound points, I like to do vision, so specifics. I don't talk to my doctor. I talk to my healthcare provider. I talk to my insurance provider. I'm not allowed to talk to my doctor anymore. I want to get back to that. We can't do that because government's got involved and they're telling us how to do it and how to make it more affordable for everybody. That we need to compete. Doctors can compete. There's a doctor that got shut down in Washington, New York City. He actually was paying people, or not paying people, he had people give them $100 and then you could visit him 5 times a year, and they said that's not in keeping with the standards. Specifics on something that big, there's been so many things that have gone wrong over the years where we've taken the cost of healthcare and increased it. My specifics is we're going to go down and we're going to look and we're going to try to deregulate, get government out of making the decisions. That's the biggest thing.
John?
I didn't hear many specifics there, but that's okay.
That's why I started out saying you want specifics and I have a vision of how to solve it.
I think the voters of this district are entitled to specifics. And I think that when you say to people that you don't have any specifics and you talk in grand vision, I don't think it gives people the
it's your question
to know what you stand for.
I understand.
Tom, it's your question.
You talk of job-killing regulations and a moratorium for 1 year. I don't get the moratorium for 1 year. As a manufacturing business owner, it just, okay, we're going to have to wait until they give us the real message. What are your top 5 examples of job-killing regulations when you talk about the moratorium?
Top 5 job-killing regulations. Well, let's start with the biggest one, Obamacare. That is a job killer. I've traveled around and I've spoken to the medical device manufacturers in this district, and the 2.3 medical device excise tax is going to cost each one, and they told me this independently, their executives, $100 million a year. Do you realize that Boston Scientific has moved their innovation to Europe? Can you imagine that? They have moved their innovation to Europe because of this 2.3% medical device tax. That is appalling to me. That's $100 million that will not be used to be put into this economy to innovate, to create new jobs and hire. So I think that Obamacare is probably the biggest one. I can't tell you 5, but that's the biggest one right there.
And you only want a 1-year moratorium on it?
No, I said, because if you remember, you're taking me out of context. I said we need a 1-year moratorium. No, I didn't say 1-year moratorium on Obamacare. I said we need a 1-year moratorium. I said we want to repeal Obamacare. I said on other regulations we need to have a 1-year moratorium so they can be reviewed, see if they should be implemented. And if we can get Congress working again in a bipartisan way, we can revisit the RAIN Act, R-E-I-N, which would allow the Congress to actually vote, an up or down vote, on implementation of any new regulations.
Tom, do you have a rebuttal at all?
No, I just wanted 5 examples, that's fine.
I gave you one.
John, your question.
I'd like to discuss a little more about the Department of Education. I'd like to get Tom's impression of the size of the Department of Education budget, the percentage of that as a percentage of our federal budget, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your insight into the Pell Grants and things of that nature. Just what you're going to tell these kids who rely on Pell Grants in order to get through school.
Well, if we got government out of higher education, the cost would go down and more people could afford it. That's number one. Number two, the Department of Education size is about $78 billion a year. It's 1/10 of what the cut is, but the fact is it's better handled. The grants would be better handled out of the state level. I would much rather that our kids go to a local bank who is backed by the state of Massachusetts to get help to go to University of Massachusetts than have to rely on the federal government. I don't see good that comes out of every dollar we send them. They keep 40 cents. Let's keep it close. I'm not saying that education's bad, never have, never will. I've got higher education just like a lot of people. But that's what you have to do. You have to get it down locally. And that means the money stays local.
And just to follow up, then, what happens for people who go out of state to school?
state, then they have that state there they can negotiate there.
So you want someone who gets accepted to a school out of state to go to a state where they don't have any relationships with bankers and figure out a way to get funding for their college?
Well, they probably can figure that out. I think the states are fair. A lot of the kids that go out of state are going for some of them are going for sports, some of them are going for specific education. I can't believe, though, that a state would turn down somebody that applies and that has the credentials to get in. I'd much rather have 50 separate entities doing education than one federal government, because if the federal government fails, everybody fails.
Tom, your question. Final question.
Final question. We have different visions, John, you and I. I believe leadership is what's going to turn Washington around. And as you know, I've been trained from early on, not only in scouts but in military, shakedown tests, this and that, show ID to vote. I've built organizations. Why do you consider yourself a leader? And in what organizations have you demonstrated leadership?
Well, thank you for the question. And thank you again to everyone here in the auditorium who participated in this debate tonight and sharing a little bit of your evening with me. So your question again is, how have I shown leadership?
Yeah, why do you consider yourself to be a leader? And in what organizations have you demonstrated leadership?
Well, I think that I've shown leadership because I have the ability to get along with disparate groups of people. People generally like me. People enjoy being around me. I've got friends. I know the other day on the radio I was asked about a relationship I had with a Democrat, So as 11% of the enrollment in this state, you need to get along with everybody. I've shown leadership in my community, especially with regard to our sports programs, when I've been coordinator for my children's soccer programs. I guess I'm a leader in my own way. I certainly was a leader when I worked in the financial sector. I ran a desk at my firm, AIG. I think that leadership takes many forms. I like to think that I'm a leader in a small way with my kids. I lead by example. I want my kids to grow up. I want them to love people. I want them to be kind. I want them to be nice. And I can tell them that all day long, but I show them with my actions. My relationship with my wife, my relationship with my family, my relationship with my friends. So I think leadership takes many different roles. I'd like to think that people here in the 3rd District, when they honored me with my primary election last cycle, and with the good return that I had, and there were more than just Republican voters in those 96,000 plus votes, to some extent they saw me as a leader. And it's incredibly humbling. So,
Tom, do you have any rebuttal?
It's not quite what I had in mind, but I'll accept it.
John, would you start with a closing statement?
Sure.
Please. 2 minutes, please.
Again, thanks to everyone here tonight who took time to share a little bit of their evening with us. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. Thank you to our moderator. Thank you to the Lowell Sun. We've heard a lot of facts and figures tonight. We've heard a lot of different things. And I was asked a question a few weeks ago. I was out in Gardner, and someone said to me, "Can you sum up in one word what this election is all about?" And I thought for a minute and said, I can't do anything in one word. But let me try a sentence. And I realized that this election is about a country heading in the wrong direction. Buyouts, takeovers, runaway spending, expanding the government on our taxpayers' dime. But what's really at risk in this election is our exceptionalism, our uniqueness. And what is that exceptionalism? It's that no matter where you live, who you are, who your parents are, whether they're rich or whether they're poor, if you work hard, you get some help, you can accomplish anything you want to. You can run for Congress twice. And people say to me, "Geez, John, you seem like you're in a hurry all the time. You're running from here, you're doing this. Slow down. Stop talking so fast." And I hope I spoke a little slower tonight. But you see, I am in a hurry because we are running out of time. These are serious times for us. And I vowed, and I made the vow as I look at my 10 and 13-year-old, that I'm not going to preside over the first generation that leaves this country less well off than the way I found it. Because that's how we convey this exceptionalism in this country. That's how we convey it from one generation to the next. By making sure we leave this country a better place for our kids and our grandkids with just a little bit more opportunity. So I encourage everyone here tonight to go out and find a candidate to support. I'd like you to support me, and I'm asking for your support. We've got a great organization. We've been endorsed by many elected officials, even though it's a primary. And we saw what happened in 2010. So I ask for your support. Again, thank you very much for everything. Please visit my website, jongolnik.com. Thank you.
Tom, closing statement, please.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming out, moderator, the panel, John. Throughout my life, I've demonstrated a commitment to give back to the community, to be involved. That's what my parents taught me. That's what I teach my kids. That's part of being an American. Show ID to vote, scouts, whatever. That's all part of it. That's what makes us involved. Tonight, I've answered questions. You know where I stand. Yes, I am visions. You know my beliefs. You know my principles. I've tried to keep the answers short. Sometimes I don't do very good at that, but I do. I remember when we were great. I remember as a 12-year-old kid watching John F. Kennedy on a TV and saying, we're going to go to the moon within this decade. It made me feel really, really neat. We didn't have the word cool back then, but it made me feel cool. We're going to the moon because we're Americans. And I remember waving to him going down Jacksboro Highway on his way to Carswell when he flew to Dallas on that November day. It's the best gift my parents ever gave to me. I remember the feeling, though, the pride we have in this nation. It really felt good. It felt great. That's what I want my grandkids, my kids to have. We don't have that right now. We can get it back. We definitely can get it back. That's why I'm asking for your vote, because I believe that when I go to Washington, I can help with that. I want to thank you once again. I'm Tom Weaver. My website's tomweaverforcongress.com. If you have any questions, please see me after. Thank you very much.
One man, one woman, one vote. That's what makes this country exceptional. Whether a Greek, yes, you were playing to the moderator, talking about the good Greeks in Lowell, yes, or an Italian, a Japanese person, a Chinese person, someone who's born here, came over on the Mayflower. That's what the country's about. That's what's exciting about having both of you run. Put yourselves out there. It is putting yourselves out there, and we greatly appreciate your efforts, both of you. So thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Jim Campanini. Thank you to the Lowell Republican City Committee. Greatly appreciate it. And thank all of you. It's an important election. Get out there and vote. Whichever way you vote just makes it all better. Thank you very much.